Man wakes up to find his body tied up with ropes. A bunch of little people were standing over him. It's almost like building a building. John, who was so confused, gave a cry. The wooden stakes rose from the ground, and he flew a few dozen meters. John thought he was dreaming when he stood up. Suddenly a little man on a horse came galloping in. A 2-meter javelin was driven straight into John's shoe. Then a dozen more hooks were thrown, and hooked it around his arse, and he started to push. And with a thud, John was thrown to the ground. He was knocked unconscious. Just a few days ago, he was a despised unemployed man. He had an accident. He was in the land of the little people. And when he woke up again, to find himself tied to a car again. As he crossed the city, the whole country came to see what was going on, apparently taking the man for an alien creature. When the princess saw the massive creature, had a bold idea in her mind, and so John was taken as a mount for the curly-haired man. Suddenly, at that moment, an alarm was sounded. The country is under enemy attack. Curly hears this and rushes behind the wheel. John was driven back, coming at a speed of 70 miles per hour. He tells John to get down, and then with a backflip he lands firmly. He's going to save the princess himself, and orders no one to interfere. But his men knew what the curly-haired man was capable of, so he flicks the switch that's strapped to John's body. John arrives just in time. He picked up a little man with one hand. He turned and threw himself into the river with a thud. He then placed the princess on the ground, but then the alarm went off again. It was the sound of a fire. It turned out that the palace was on fire. The king was trapped. John was so anxious that he tried to pull his hands out, but the ground shook with the heat. John's men shouted to him that he needed a lot of water and to do something about it. As soon as the words were out of his mouth, John pulled down his trousers in public. A huge stream of water was poured over the king's face. The fire was instantly brought under control. The king thanked John by saying he was a savior and invited him to the evening banquet. He took a whole plate of fruit and dried it right into his mouth. And then he told them he was bragging, that he had come from heaven. He had a body that was invincible. He fights all kinds of small monsters. He made them stare in awe. They all looked at him with admiration. The next day, the king who worshipped John organized over 10,000 workers to build John a luxury villa. Even for a cup of coffee, he was greeted by 24 people. It was a real treat. He was even given a multimedia. At night, he would watch the movie with the whole country. It was a great life. What's more, the king even gave John the position of general. The curly-haired man, who was already a general, could not bear such an indignity. In a fit of rage, he switched off the missile defense system of the little people. This was seen by the enemy a kilometer away. They immediately ordered an immediate attack. The king immediately sent John to fight. John saw the hundreds of ships coming in force. He was scared, but he had no choice but to go. He took off his red sleeves and his size 39 canvas shoes. He walked slowly towards the enemy. John didn't attack them when he got to them. Instead, he asked them to pretend to act. And when he said that, the enemies were stunned. What kind of joke is this man making? With a wave of his hand, the cannons were firing at him, and with a shudder, they all bounced back. The enemy was caught off guard. He felt so powerful, so he dragged all the ships together again, and he ended the war all by himself. It was a battle that made John famous. The whole country was John's shadow. He wanted to play games, and when he wanted to play a game, a bunch of little people would play along. When he wanted a massage, a professional massage team was on hand. When he wanted a haircut, he was greeted by several Tony teachers. He looks good enough. This made the curly-haired man even more devastated. The next day he went straight to the enemy's country. He brought with him the drawings of the robot he had found from John's place. Shortly afterwards, a steel egg appeared in front of John. Inside it sat the curly-haired man. He wanted to fight John one-on-one. John had a very disdainful look on his face. Suddenly the iron egg turned into a robot that was even bigger than him. John instantly panicked, turned around and started to run away. He was grabbed by the robot. John started to beg for mercy. He surrendered, to the dismay of the nation. John was then tied to a boat by the enemy. He was taken to another island. Just as he arrived, he was covered by a glass bottle. He woke up wearing a pink princess dress when a huge girl appeared in front of him. The girl treated him like a toy, feeding him milk, putting on a diaper. If he doesn't behave, this is what happens to him. As he was about to decide to spend the rest of his life like this, a man from Lilliput sneaks in. He told John of the recent arrival of another huge woman on the island. Little did he know that this woman was John's goddess. Because of the power of love, John was rejuvenated. He left Giant Island in a parachute and came back to fight again and fought the robot. When his men took the opportunity to get inside the robot, after a fierce confrontation between the two, John was thrown to the side. Just when he thought he was going to die, John's men unplugged the power just in time. John took this opportunity to strike back. He took off the king's portrait and started hammering away. A frenzy of action brought him down and ripped out the robot's connection, and the battle was won.